All right. It is 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. We are here live with Jenn Lyons, who's been on a couple of times before. Obviously, author of The Chorus of Dragons, as well as The Sky on Fire.
The Sky on Fire.
Yeah.
That's the
I
one.
have to look every time because I always think Fire in the Sky, and I know that's not right. It's like,
Nope.
that's the Noah Wiley TV show. Anyhow, but you are going to be doing your very first, at least published, obviously, science fiction book, which is new for everybody. And also, you are going to be doing a little crowdfunding. So,
Yeah.
first and foremost, Paul Jeff's been on here a few times, but we just yak. So, you're my first 3-time interview, and you're the first one where I have not read the book. I've got no information about this whatsoever. Just so everybody can get a little look-see here, I'm going to go ahead and pop this up real quick. This is the mock-up of what the book is going to look like. You have a backer kit that we're going to talk about coming out March 18th. Best-selling author, I already covered that, Chorus of Dragon, The Sky on Fire. Peace is coming. I like that little tag. And then the other thing, and I'm just going to read this for everybody in case they can't see it on their screen. This is what put me in. Even, I mean, obviously it's you. I would have checked it out anyhow. But nobody was prepared for peace when the new Sarkodine Emperor. I probably should have had you just read it, but unexpected.
I'll do it if you want.
Okay, you go ahead and do it. That way I don't mispronounce anything.
Okay. Nobody was prepared for peace. When the new Sarkodine Emperor unexpectedly offers to withdraw all forces and restore Earth to human rule, a century of interstellar conflict slams to a halt. For Mallory McLean, extraction expert, full negative, and a woman with a lot of secrets, it's time to move on. Except she can't, because just days before the peace signing, she watches in horror as an ordinary janitor, a man who never should have held a gun before in his life, calmly murders a room full of people, including an important Sarkodine official, his bodyguards, and Mallory's childhood best friend. Then the assassin turns the weapon on himself. No hesitation, no emotion. It's as if someone flipped a switch. Maybe someone did. Officials on both sides want to sweep it under the rug, but Mallory wants answers. Someone is turning ordinary people into disposable killers, but the ordinary people all have one thing in common. They all graduated from a secret Sarkodine school dedicated to training human assassins. As far as Mallory ever knew, though, none of them were trained to be sleeper agents conditioned to obey triggers even at the cost of their own lives. If she's wrong, then it's a big problem, because Mallory trained at the same school.
And that is the line that hooked me, even if you didn't have author points with me, which you already, of course, do. Yeah, that line right there is like, I've got to read this whenever this comes out. So, obviously, this one's a little bit different than we're used to. You obviously, there's no dragons as far as I know.
If you squint,
okay.
Like, there's a mention that they might exist in the universe. Obviously, they're not going to be the dragons that I normally write about, but dragon gets used as a word. It appears.
Well, nice. Well, I mean, it was probably hard for you to not sneak that in somewhere.
Almost impossible, yeah.
Couple of questions. Obviously, I don't know a whole lot about the book, but there's two main things I want to talk about. First of all, your first foray into science fiction. Why science fiction now?
Well, okay, so a lot of people don't understand about me is that I wrote science fiction first. This is actually a reboot of the very first novel I ever wrote. Very first novel I ever wrote wasn't fantasy, it was science fiction. And science fiction has always been and always will be near and dear to my heart. So, I mean, that's why science fiction. I love it. Pretty much it's as simple as that. Why now? The timing was right. You know, we had gone through some things where it's hard to explain it. And I don't want to get into the full details of it, but traditional publishing takes a long time. It takes a long time. And to put it bluntly, I just kind of got tired of waiting. And so since Tor, my normal traditional publisher, kind of wanted me to stick with fantasy, I was like, well, do you guys mind if I just do this on the side then? And they were, yeah, sure, go ahead. So here we are.
Nice. Yeah, I did read all the information, but for the people who had not seen it, I did read all the stuff that came Obviously, anybody who's looking at this right below in the description, I've only got one link right now, and it is to the backer kit, which starts March 18th.
Yes.
But we're just getting a chance to talk about it beforehand. And so I think you've already kind of answered the second question too, which was going to be why backer kit. But
Mm,
it's because Tor did it. But Tor's letting you go ahead and do the sci-fi thing, and they're going to hang on to you for the fantasy part.
right. Right. Yeah.
What can you tell us about the book other than this, if anything?
I can tell you. I could
Without
tell you so
spoiling.
much about the book. My little succinct elevator pitch, which of course is in the book itself, but good enough, is that it is kind of Star Wars meets Jason Bourne meets X-Men.
Gotcha. I do have to say, just on that short snippet, I was thinking much more Red Room meets Manchurian Candidate, but maybe in space.
There's a little Manchurian Candidate in there to be sure, but mostly we're on the other side of that with something, and I'm not going to spoil other things, but
Okay.
yeah, no, it's really about. I mean, it's really about one of the things that really always had me about with this story was the idea that it's what happens when the fighting theoretically stops, right? When the war stops. And as we've seen time and time again throughout history, that doesn't stop the problems. In fact, very often it's just a different trading out and developing a different set of problems. So I really wanted to write about that. I wanted to, sort of present this sci-fi. Okay, great. We've won. Now
Wow.
what? Particularly because you have all of these different in this. So again, long story short, it's a futuristic story in which at some point in humanity's future, we and I have to caveat this that I wrote this way before this was a headline thing. Humanity is dealing with a catastrophic epidemic, a pandemic, and not dealing well with it, and basically losing a pretty good chunk of the population, government collapse, all that sort of thing. And these aliens show up and offer to take care of it all, make it all right, help humanity out. And they do. And, at some point, humanity turns around and goes, when did we get conquered? What just happened? And, so this is centuries later, and they're again, this peace signing is finally happening, but you have these different groups of humans that have you have the ones that the alien state control of, and that's a distinct cultural group, and you have the people who never came in and kind of live Mad Max style existences in the wilderness, and that's a different group. You have the ones that ended up in colonies on other planets and other star systems. That's a different group, and then you have the pirates who just kind of take advantage of everything they can to be pirates. But so you have all these different groups that previously had mostly been focused on getting rid of the aliens, and now they're gone. Now the aliens are gone. So humans are looking at each other. It's a thing we do, Yeah. All these different groups suddenly don't have that common enemy and are having to deal with each other. And then of course the main character is dropped into the middle of this as somebody who's trying to figure out what's going on with these sleeper agents, and finding that it's kind of a question that even if people would have normally wanted her to answer that question, they want the peace signing to happen more than they want those answers to happen. And anything that looks like it might jeopardize that peace signing is like, stop, don't do this. So politics gets involved with this sort of, this might be important, but this thing over here is way more important, and you need to stay out of trouble and keep a low profile. So,
and if anybody is, thinking in their head, Captain America: Brave New World, Let's remember that in your information you put out, at least the start of this book was back before Chorus of Dragons.
Oh
correct?
yeah.
This has been going around a long time. It just seems to be dropping in a very appropriate time frame.
It does. Yeah. No, I mean, I always laugh. I will tell people, because this is the book I over researched. It was the first book I ever wrote.
Mhm.
And I say this, it's not really this book, but its predecessor was the first book I ever wrote. And it was the one I did as a dare. You know, my first husband dared me to write this. And I over researched it. I so over researched it. It's the reason why when COVID hit, I was spitting out all of these answers on how certain things worked, is because I'd spent well over a year researching epidemiology. For something that ends up being like a throwaway line in the book. It just doesn't end up being important at all. And then, I did all of this research on hyperspace theory and M theory and brains and all kinds of stuff. And again, do people really care? Did it really matter? No, I didn't need to research any of that. But it was a good lesson in that. It was a good lesson, and you can over research.
And I don't think it's just you though either. I think I've talked to a lot of authors that research for a story and they end up using maybe 3% of what they researched.
Yeah.
But you might not have found that 3% if you hadn't looked at the whole thing.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But I think it was really funny because, again, as a first book, I really wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be so perfect for the previous version of this thing that I wrote like this. Oh God, it's like the classic "Don't do this," right? I wrote this 20-page prologue that was basically the how we get here history, and of course, nobody cared about that, and it wasn't really for readers. It was for me. So realizing that I could write that and then not publish it was an important lesson.
Yeah. Definitely hear. I'm not an author myself, but I hear a lot of authors is part of the problem is when you get down and the editors get a hold of it and you start having to delete all those wonderful lines that you wrote because they're just not necessary. Or as my wife likes to say, me talking. It's like you could speak a lot less and say a lot more. Anyhow, that one was free. Okay. No, just kidding.
I mean, I think the challenge in those sorts of things is figuring out what supports your story and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately it, is does this actually support your story? I got into some crazy arguments with my editor over the books in A Chorus of Dragons, of course, because that story was so large that that I would get into situations where my editor would be saying, "Oh, well, you don't really need this," and I'd be going, "Actually, I do, because it's setting this thing up that isn't in this book." So I had to do an awful lot of that, where I was having to defend myself because I knew a thing would come up in the third book, fourth book, something like that.
Gotcha. I don't want to get into the other parts just yet. One thing I know, because somebody had asked me beforehand, and I think you already mentioned it before we went live. Obviously, everybody knows Kickstarter. What pushed you to BackerKit?
Well, okay, so we did some research. My husband and I did some research before we started this off, and one of the things that we were concerned about, I mean, obviously, Kickstarter is huge, and it's kind of the default one that everyone goes to. But we were curious to see, the pros and cons of doing that versus going with somebody else. And one of the things that we kind of discovered about BackerKit was, first of all, that most of the time people are doing stuff on Kickstarter and then it's being fulfilled by BackerKit anyway, right? Like it's still going to BackerKit. It's just starting off Kickstarter and then going to BackerKit. But also, when we were looking at the number of successful crowdfund projects, comparing Kickstarter and BackerKit for books, there wasn't a whole lot of difference, right? Like now you could, in fact, I think BackerKit came in a little bit more than Kickstarter did. Now, you could make the argument that part of that is because some of the people that are moving over here, Brandon Sanderson, Mercedes Lackey, are big names that have their own followers. So yeah, of course they're getting funded, but it does just kind of seem like, to a certain extent, my suspicion is it's because it's a smaller pond, right? It's easier to get out and be viewed because you're not competing with 100,000 other projects out there. But BackerKit just had a lot of really interesting metrics and ways of figuring out what you're going to do, and just like a lot of really interesting things that that we thought made up for the fact that it's a smaller service. So I mean, time will tell if that was a good decision or not, but certainly from a numbers perspective, it seemed like it was a good decision.
Gotcha.
So
yeah, I know I've done 2 Kickstarters so far. Obviously, Full Negative will be the third. But yeah, I think they've all got BackerKit. I had a BackerKit login already,
yeah,
even though I'd only quote unquote done Kickstarters, and I realized, oh, that's yeah, I've already got books from BackerKit. So
right. So they started doing their own thing, and they started releasing their own, go direct to BackerKit instead of going to Kickstarter. So so right now we're in the run up to the launch, where I'm just trying to, you're screaming, please, senpai, look at me. It's definitely a thing. And, from a practical level, I suppose you could argue that this is a thing, like ideally you want to start it a couple months out, but this year being what this year is, we basically went, as soon as we got the rights back from Tor to do this, we just went, nah, let's do it. So we are hopping out there immediately.
yeah, I think it's a fine line getting that part where you want to hype it early enough that people are anticipating it, but not so long that they've tired of it and they've moved on to something else by the time it drops.
Right. Yeah. Which I think is a real danger. It's definitely something that can happen. I think so I'm in a weird position, right?
Mhm.
In that I am also the artist.
Oh, okay.
So
I don't think I caught that part.
yeah, all of the art is me, right? So the t-shirt designs, the stickers, the buttons, the character art, the cover, all of that is me. And as a result, I haven't been getting a lot of sleep lately. So
Gotcha.
it's so funny because the book is done, right?
Mhm.
I do want to get a professional copy editor in to look at it. I'm absolute crap about proofing my own work, as anybody who knows me knows. So I want to get a professional in to do that. And then of course there's upfront costs to some of these things that I just won't be able to do without funding the
Right.
BackerKit project, particularly for like hardcovers and all of that. Printers don't let you do that one, print on demand. So
Fair.
yeah, it is what it is, right? So if I want to offer that, if I want to have that available, I need to have a project and have a project that funds. That said, it's simultaneously a lot of work, a lot of work, but I'm not sure how much I should compare that to somebody else doing the back, what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like somebody else who is doing the BackerKit probably isn't doing the artwork themselves.
No,
Yeah.
I would say very few writers actually do their own art.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can count them on one hand. We're out there, but there aren't very, very many of us. So, I mean, I think it's obviously, I feel uniquely blessed to be in that position because it would have been much more difficult to do this otherwise, bordering on impossible, just because, again, I shouldn't expect any artist to want to work on a,
IOU.
IOU. If we get funded, we can pay you, but otherwise, we really can't. Yeah, no, I can't. That's not a thing that anyone should be expected to sign up for.
And that's the thing I think maybe it's important to point out to people too, if they're watching this, is things like Kickstarter. And I don't know what your goal is. The Kickstarter, the backer kit's not live yet, but I'm just going to throw out a number. If the number were 20 grand or 50 grand or whatever that number is that you have to hit.
Right.
If people, commit 10 grand, well, and it doesn't hit that number, they don't get charged. So you don't get anything unless you hit your goal.
Yep. It doesn't fund. It absolutely doesn't fund at that point. And nobody, congratulations. Sorry, guys, for everyone who showed up. We're not playing this game, and nobody gets dinged for anything.
We were $1 short.
Yeah. That is definitely, obviously, I'm hoping that we meet that and go past, but not gonna lie, it is a little nerve-wracking, right? You're going up to it and you're like, okay, we've got to make sure we've got enough people. And I mean, right now, if it was just based on everyone who's subscribed, we don't. So,
gotcha.
But we're also still some days out and we're still getting the word out. So there is that as well.
Well, you also don't know how much each of those people is going to actually spend, because
no, we don't. Yeah.
And for people who aren't familiar, if anybody's not familiar with Kickstarter or that type of thing, there's usually levels. And I don't know if you want to get into quote unquote stretch goals or anything like that, but there's like levels. You spend this much, you get this item, you spend this much to get that item. If you just want to donate money and you don't even want to necessarily get the book, there's usually a section for that as well. So you never know how much people are going to spend and whether you're going to make that goal or not.
Yeah, I do want to talk about stretch goals because there's one stretch goal in particular that I am very, very crossing my fingers because I really want it to happen. And that is, if we reach this stretch goal, I'm going to release a settings guide.
Okay. I think I saw something about that.
Because this has been in the works, right? Like this setting, the general universe that this story takes place in has been in development in one point or another, at one degree or another, for 40 years. I've got as much about this universe as I have about the universe in A Chorus of Dragons. There's just a huge amount of world building that exists, and I would love to share it, right? Obviously I'm biased, so I think it's cool, but I do think it's cool. So I would love to be able to share it, but it's not something that I currently have fully written or in a format that I can just automatically drop it and say, here you go. So yeah, that's a stretch goal because it will take time and energy to have happen. I want to do it, but we got to make sure we're in a position that I can do it.
Yes. Let's worry about making our goal first. And then the stretch goals, those are just a nice plus.
Yeah.
And then, maybe 10 years from now, we'll be talking about the Wraithmarked edition. For anybody who doesn't know, that's one of those like specialty things that does like a kind of like Easton or, some special edition of a book. So, although I'm figuring most of the people that are watching this, who watch my stuff are probably nerds, Wraithmark, Broken Binding, all that stuff. They know what it is.
Yeah. No, that's actually been a really interesting thing that's happened in the last, I don't know. When was the first time I was aware of that sort of thing happening? It's been like 6-7 years. It's probably been happening for longer than that, but that's the first time I consciously became aware that people were doing that.
Well, I think he always had like Easton's and folio editions.
Yeah.
But then I think once the crates and boxes went crazy, like Illumicrate and Owlcrate
Yeah.
and Fairy Loot, and then I think it really started tumbling. And of course, you get the people who's like, I've got to have it's my favorite book, and I've got to have every special edition of it.
Yeah. No, I actually do remember when my debut, Rune of Kings came out, right?
Mhm.
I was at a convention and somebody came up for a signing and they had a copy of the book with gilt edges. And I'm like, I don't we didn't release a copy of the book. What? Where did you get this? What is this? And it turns out it was a box thing where somebody had gone through and manually, sprayed
Mhm.
edges on all of these books to get them to be, something special. And I was like, okay,
My daughter went through a phase where she was gilding her own books, gilt edges. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
think she
no.
decided that was, way too messy, way too fast.
There was a guy on YouTube, and we're going way afield here, but there was a guy on YouTube that has this really interesting technique that he does with like metallic vinyl. Basically, it's a much less messy way of doing gilt edges. It comes out looking really cool. If I had the time, it's the sort of thing I totally would do. But
Yeah, I don't know. There's somebody on Instagram I've seen who does the whole thing where she like tears off the cover and like does her own. It was like, okay, somebody's got way too much time and talent on their hands, because if I did that, it would just look horrible.
I mean, it's delightful, right? You can totally understand where somebody. Well, I can totally understand how somebody would look at that and go like, get that satisfaction of crafting that, but don't have time.
Quick question, getting back to the book.
Yes.
Is this planned to be a standalone, or if it goes well, do you have more stuff in that world you might like to do?
I have so much more stuff in this world I would love to do. It is technically a standalone in that the story completes,
Mhm.
right? But it is not a standalone in that there's,
There's more to be told in this universe.
yeah, and there's more to be told with specific characters that appear in this book. So without spoilering anything.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I definitely would love to do more in this universe. It's pretty open-ended. So
But I'm still waiting on Sky and Fire book 2. I know you didn't promise one, but that ending, I need it. We're getting off topic. All right. So, like I said, this is an interesting interview in the fact that first time I actually haven't read the book because there is no book yet. So, a little bit at this point, I don't know how many questions I have because I don't know what to ask. Is there anything else you just want to talk about? Either about the book, about the process?
let's see. Let's talk economics.
All right. See if I got a textbook here somewhere.
Yeah. So sexy economics. Yay. But no, when I kind of pulled the manuscript out of a drawer and decided to rebuild it with, I've like to think I've grown as a writer since I was 25 or whatever. And certainly that first version was, it's not really a mystery why it didn't get snatched up by agents and publishers. It was not very good. But I thought it had good bones. But anyway, one of the tasks that I set to myself was to give the aliens an economy that didn't rely on capitalism,
Mhm.
because I just didn't, there's other things out there. I didn't want it to be capitalism. And so it sort of became this this kind of dissection of, Star Trek, right? Like, how does the Star Trek economy work? How does that function? And I never got a good answer for that one, right? Like, I never really figured out how the Star Trek economy, the Federation, works on a fundamental level, but I did figure out how it might work in the mirror universe, because that's this, which is that everything that you do as a citizen of the Sarkodne Empire, from how you dress to your appearance, your ability with skills of any kind, from sports to calligraphy, how well you test, how well you how well you perform on the job, how well you behave, all of that is an additive score. So all of that gives you score points. And this is where really you can really tell that I work in video games. You reach certain tiers and you unlock the next level, right? And when you're in a level, you unlock all the benefits that go with that level. So there is no money. There's no buying anything. You either have enough rank to be entitled to a thing, or you don't, depending on what your score is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that way all the way up, right? Like the emperor of the empire is not determined by birth, it's determined by score. It's this whole thing. And there's some variations. There's some things like, there's some ways to basically spend score points to get things you might not otherwise be able to get. But that's tricky, because obviously if your score gets dropped, you get fewer benefits. And this goes to a very specific level, in that all of the citizens of the Sarkodne Empire are implanted with something called a reality lens, which is basically this nanite organism that locks into your optic and auditory nerves, and it controls both what you see and what you can see. So it can send what you're seeing and hearing to these sort of overseer computers to store, but it can also downgrade. So like maybe you don't get to, if your rank isn't high enough, maybe you don't actually get to see things clearly. Or maybe like you literally don't get to see things that are pretty. You don't get to exist in a universe that is pleasant to look at, because all of these things are under control of these outside forces. So it's another motivating factor to increase your score. If you have a high enough score, you can start controlling how people with a lower score see you. It gets very...
I think I kind of already got that, because I can never see what my wife has asked for me to get in the fridge.
So, I mean, it's very Big Brother could only dream of this kind of a deal. And if you, so what happens if you lose enough score to get knocked to level, you get knocked to level, and that's a thing. If you lose enough score to go into negatives, then there's a classification for that, char.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are listed as being char, they have work camps for those people. And people tend to not survive for very long in the work camps, right? If you're char, you get taken away and you probably are never heard from again. And then there's the char that are so dangerous and so actually worthy of being into the negatives that they can't be controlled. They've escaped. They're performing terrorist attacks. They're defying all attempts to capture them. They're doing all of these other things. They're massive criminals who, at least from the Sarkodne mindset, are guilty of all these kinds of different atrocities. Those are labeled full negatives.
Gotcha. It's like your economy system is met lit RPG or something.
Little bit, yeah. Actually, that's a fun way of looking at it. Yeah. And all of that in the service of this absolute ultimate control mechanism, right? The empire is built off of everyone behaving and making absolutely sure that everyone behaves. Humans are really bad at that.
I do like it though, because I love the fact that for once we get an alien race that isn't using Earth-based finances, Earth-based. A lot of times, like the old joke about Star Trek back in the day is like, you wanted a new alien, you just slapped a paper plate on somebody's forehead and they were whatever. But it's the fact that they're actually different. Not everybody's what we expect.
Right. It's actually funny, right? So the Sarkodine look humanish, right?
Mhm.
They do. They're different colored skin, different eyes, but basically they look humanish. And because of that, humanity has suffered. Because the Sarkodine showed up, they looked at humans and went, "You are our long lost cousins. The gods have clearly meant for you to serve us."
As
Obviously.
you do with long lost cousins,
Right? Yeah. Look at you. You guys are clearly a lost offshoot of our race. It could not possibly be the other way around, because that's not a thing that the Sarkodine would ever tolerate believing. And in all of their conquests and all of the territory that they hold, humanity is the first race that they've encountered that does look like them. So thus they're kind of giving humanity more attention, and that's not necessarily a good thing. They're treating them like their own citizens, which, initially when the Sarkodine came in and said that they were going to do all this stuff for humanity and how they were going to treat them like Sarkodine citizens, the question that humanity didn't ask and should have was, well, how do you treat your citizens? The answer was not actually really good. Not very good at all.
It depends on whether you ask them or not.
Right. But I kind of went, it was really funny. I actually had an agent reject the book because she was like, I really don't like it when the aliens are just humans with a different color of makeup put on them. And I'm like, you realize that's actually a major plot point, right? I know you're never supposed to argue with an agent, but I was just like, that's actually a major plot point of the story. I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, but suffice it to say, I'm me, and there's no way I would put something like that in a book without talking about it, right? Because every other alien species in the entire universe looks dramatically different from humans, with none of this. You've just done a Star Trek different nose.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I'm also going to paraphrase because I just to keep it family friendly, but he also mentioned it's Kendall. I think it's a he. Could be. It's one of those names you're not sure. Sounds sick, super dystopian, and cyberpunky.
Yeah, it is a little bit cyberpunky, and I realize I took that risk with like the cover, because the cover has a lot of different some of the different viewing things as strips and glitches across the front of it, and it does look a little cyberpunky. But that's okay. I don't mind that necessarily.
Yeah, I think we just kind of assume certain things by a cover.
Yeah. I think I worked around that by putting a big old planet on the back, so it's
Right.
really very clear that she's on a spaceship or space station or something like that.
But I mean, hey, you could be on a space station and still be cyberpunky. It's a lot.
Yeah, but yeah, no,
But it's not.
I had a lot of. I hesitate to use the word fun, because this is truly an evil system, but I had a lot of fun coming up with it.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can have a lot of fun if everything's just completely, utopian.
No,
That would be a very boring book to write.
I mean, somebody can do it. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
never going to say that somebody can't pull it off, but in this particular case, everything is going wrong for everyone. So,
But for some reason, and they all lived happily ever after doesn't work as the entire story.
yeah,
Nobody wants to read that.
indeed, and this is, I think one of the things that just make just make the utopia horrifying, which people have done. Hi, Brave New World. But um, but I think that you definitely get one of the things I like about science fiction. There's many things I love about science fiction, but I feel like a lot of times, especially in fantasy, you get pushed for the happy ending, right? And certainly, that was the question I got asked a lot when Ruin of Kings came out. Is this series going to have a happy ending? People really, really wanted to know that. And in sci-fi, I don't think that question gets asked as much.
Fair.
Because we're a little more used to it may not have a happy ending.
I feel like sci-fi always has just a little bit of horror in it more than fantasy does.
Just a sizzle.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a tiny bit of horror, or a lot, depending on what you're doing. But
fair.
Yeah. And there were just a lot of things that it's sort of one of those situations where once you change one thing, the rest of the world building. Excellent. Yes. Perfect. And if once you make one change, the rest of the world building just kind of falls into place, and that was very much the case here. Like once I figured out what the reality lenses were and how the economy worked, an awful lot of how the Sarkodne systems worked kind of just fell into place. So yeah. Let's see, what else can I talk about? There's a great many things I could talk about. I mean,
yeah, that's like I said, that's my downside is not having read the book for once. I don't know what to ask that's not a spoiler.
So,
because I don't want to be spoiled, but I'm still going to get the book.
Right. Yeah, indeed. So this is, I'm going to like confess deep personal things, and the people who will either come in later or watching now and get to share in these personal things. So just like I have admitted that that A Chorus of Dragons has its roots in Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was, a lot of the characters were my characters when they started out. Mallory was like the third character I ever created for Champions.
Oh, okay.
And I think I was 15, which means she is the oldest of any of the characters that I've ever created to make it into print. Older than any of the ones from A Chorus of Dragons. But so the joke there and the I guess how it gets personal thing there was that I'd played her for about a year when our team leader left. He had to move away. And the other people in the group, who were all men, most of whom were older than me, thought it would be hilarious to vote Mallory, to vote me, team leader, while I was off in the restroom. I really don't know what they thought was going to happen there. Like, to this day, I don't know what they thought was going to be the result of that. If I was going to like throw my hands up and, say, I don't want to be part of this anymore, or if I was going to, I just don't know.
I think there's a tendency for a lot of us, though, too. Is like, let's volunteer whoever's not here right now.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, what ended up happening was that campaign lasted for 10 years, which is a long time.
So you did okay.
And I was team leader the entire time. And so when that dare happened to write a book, I, of course, did it with the character I was the most familiar with, this very opinionated, hyper intelligent, sarcastic, very broken woman who had seen it all basically by that point. I mean, 10 years of playing a weekly Champions game is like a 40-year run of comics, right? She'd been through everything. She'd had her powers stripped. She'd gotten a different set back. She just everything. So I had this beautiful condensed, it never happened again. Just, a 10-year campaign is a unicorn. But I really love how broken she is. Very, very broken. And I love how that has played into the story and has become its own thing. She's kind of, I wouldn't have described her this way at the beginning because I didn't have the comparison to make. I wasn't reading those comics at the time, and certainly it's more of a movie thing at this point, but she's kind of a female Tony Stark, right? She's extremely smart, often too smart for her own good. And she has some problems making emotional connections. So, she's absolutely like the first of many broken characters I've created, but I would consider her like she's always going to be queen.
She had plenty of time to get broken. So
plenty of time to get broken.
I do have to say, I don't know if I just didn't remember it or if I just assumed, because you've told me about the dare before. And I think I just always thought it was Ruin of Kings was the story that came out of that.
No, that was this one. Or more to the point, it was the previous version that, I pretty much stripped this thing down to the skeleton and rewrote it. So, right. You troll. So he wants me to talk about, that's my husband, by the way, and he wants me to talk about this character that I had in the first version of the book, who is this, if you've watched Andor, right? If you've watched the TV series Andor, it was Cyril Karn. It's that character. It was absolutely that character. It's almost uncanny. That guy. And that was a character in the very first version of the book. And every time I would make a change or I would go through and do something, Mike would be like, well, but I don't really know that. And he would talk me into making a little bit of a shift with this character. Gotcha. And by the time we were finished, it's not Cyril anymore. It's nothing like Cyril. And he's a major character. So previously he was like a little side character, showed up a couple of times, just long enough to be annoying. And then he was off again. And now he's like a major character. So, I
just tell Mike if he keeps it up, he might get turnerized. So, we'll see how it goes.
So, it was very much funny because sometimes the characters do it themselves, right? Where they just kind of morph on you as you proceed and they turn into other things. But in this particular case, Mike was pushing pretty hard for that one. And I didn't disagree with him. So, I didn't have to go along with it, but I just think it's really funny how Stuart, the character in question, how he changed as went from being hardcore Imperial to something a little not that. So
I'm still upset I'm not getting my Claw Talon, team up book. So, hey. Two of my favorites.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid even if I could possibly manage it, they're separated by about 10,000 years or something like that. So couldn't happen.
I knew they at least existed in the same universe
Mhm.
ish. Just not
No,
necessarily
they
the
do.
same galaxy though.
Yeah, no, they're different planets in the same galaxy. It's just that
Oh,
literally
they're
a Scion.
galaxy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh
I
yeah,
knew it was
yeah,
the
no,
same
no, same
universe. I just
galaxy.
didn't realize it was the same galaxy.
Same galaxy, absolutely same galaxy. It's just that that a lot less time has passed, right, for
Gotcha.
the people on A Sky on Fire than back on Ompher with A Chorus of Dragons. So, yeah.
Oh, Tuckerized. Yeah, sorry. Mike knew what I meant. I think I said
Yeah, no,
Turnerized.
absolutely.
Tuckerized.
Yeah, so, and it very much became like you could as far as the champions and the superhero aspect of it, very much in this book, while it's there, it's kind of I don't want to say if you blink you'll miss it because that's not true, but it's not like nobody's running around with costumes and stopping bank robberies or anything like that. It's much more sort of in a dystopian cyberpunk universe. If you realized you had superpowers, what would you do? And for a vast majority of it, it's no, don't tell anyone.
Exactly.
For God's sakes, don't tell anyone.
That just puts a big target on your back.
Right. At best, you're going to end up in a lab somewhere, right? Like on a table or something. Yeah, don't tell anyone. So that's a pretty big thing.
I always thought that
So.
was the worst part about Batman and Robin. Batman always talks because there's actually a comic where he talks about the fact that he wears all the dark because he doesn't have the superpowers and he can't have a big target on his shirt and everything like that. And then he's like, and then here's my young sidekick who I'm going to dress in red and yellow.
Yeah. But I always did like the Frank Miller thing. Like, why do you think I wear the giant target on my chest? Because that's the armored part. I'm giving you the thing to aim at that's right on the armored part. Which I always thought was a nice retcon for something that is otherwise not. I still love champions hero system champions. I think I'm the only one of my current peer group, my current friend group, who like they always tell me what they want and I write up the character and give it back to them because I'm the only one who can do it. Yeah, it'll always be near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I never played that, but I do remember I loved the game City of Heroes when it was. It didn't last forever.
Very
already
different.
died, but yeah.
Yeah, very
the whole
different
playing
system.
this thing though.
Yeah, Champions is very much it would not survive very. I mean, it's out. It is currently like you can get Hero System now, but it's very math heavy.
Gotcha.
Right? Like you're doing it's a point buy system with a complicated set of rules on how you can spend your points. So it is very much the min-maxiness to the system has a lot to do with like literally how good you are at coming up with those different math combinations. And yeah, I'm apparently the only one who can do it well. Yeah, no, exactly. Ted said I showed my D&D buddies and they were at a loss. Yeah, absolutely, because it's complicated. It's a complicated system. It's completely open-ended. You can do whatever you want to do. There's
With
pretty much nothing you can't come up with and do, but yeah, it's very crunchy. And all the dice, absolutely all the dice. Which used to be fun back when we all played in person because you could show up and, when the GM would like pick up 60 dice, I'm not joking about that, and roll that out and everybody would be like, oh, we're screwed. It was brilliant. But nowadays it's not as much of a thing.
Yeah, we'll just all go over to Shauna McGuire's house. I know she's got like those card catalogs just full of dice.
I have huge collections of dice, and I just they sit there because I can't. All of my all of my current gaming groups are divided, like in other states and things like that. So there's no question about getting together in person.
And for like 3 years there, nobody could get within 6 feet of each other anyhow. So it was like, what did I roll?
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, I think that was it's always an interesting thing, like what sparks something very quickly. I mean, because this is not a lit RPG, right?
Right.
This is very much not a thing where I'm not saying I've ever done that, but I might have done that. But I mean, it's there's a point where you have to. I don't think I ever like sat down and said I'm going to figure out what happens in this fight based on the rolls that are happening, right? Like that's not a thing that you do. It's just like here's an inspiration, and it's going to spark the idea for a story, but then you go off and you do your own thing. And is what the criteria are for a good story and a good tabletop RPG are very different.
Yep.
Yeah, buying books and reading books are two different hobbies.
Yeah.
I do like buying the click-clack stones, but I also like using the click-clack stones, and sadly I don't get much chance to do that anymore.
I think though there's always like a few of us, for instance, I read The Sky on Fire, the ARC, and I still got the had to go out and get the trophy version. It just sits up there unread because I've already read the book. But
they sent me the really cool. Hold on a second.
Oh, yours is prettier than mine.
Like they sent me the super cool. See.
Although I do like your signature.
Yeah, number 1, which I was really thrilled about because, right. I've done these where they kind of forgot to send me one.
I'm going to have a little fun with you, Jen. Don't think I'm upset about this. I'm actually enjoying this. I had a place you were going on tour. I had you sign this book and they sent it to me. And I don't think they read the name correctly.
Oh, no.
To George. I don't care. I'm keeping it.
Oh, my God.
Cool. Well, I think I told them, I said Edward. It's like, if you say Griftkin, she'll know who it is. And my guess is they just scribbled G something. And I got that. And I just had to laugh. I don't care. It's like I said, I got it for the hardcover. It's signed. Yeah. But yeah, I just thought that was.
If you're hilarious. Not careful, I'm going to sign them to George forever now.
Yeah.
It's just going to be to George. I will admit.
Call him George.
I will admit, some of those tours, like towards the end of it, when you get really, really tired, who knows what you're signing.
Oh yeah, and I used to work at a bookstore, so I've also seen the thing where somebody's just telling you, it's like, this is for so and so, and you're just, so if they misread it,
yeah,
you're not looking at it, or you're trying to read somebody else's writing. Have fun with that.
Yeah. There's all sorts of things. I think the worst one that I remember was somebody had said a name to me, but they were talking about their friend the whole time while I was there, and so of course I signed it out to their friend. Yeah, they were very gracious about it, but
makes a nice gift.
Deeply embarrassed. No, I think I covered it up and like made a dragon out of it or something.
Oh, okay. They could just let their friend think that they were really thinking about them.
Yeah, no, it was pretty funny because it's that whole thing. You're hearing one thing and you're concentrating on multiple things at the same time, and
Oh, yeah, especially when you've got, I mean, some of these places, depending on the signing, you just got to stack. And it's always the signings, a lot of
Yeah.
times are at the end. You're already tired.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
been talking.
Yeah.
You've
No,
met 47
absolutely.
people.
Yeah. We've had to learn, like, you bring Post-it notes because, ideally you want somebody to write down their name so that you're not guessing while you're trying to write stuff down. Yeah, there's like this whole thing that you learn after a little while of how to do signings and stay sane. But,
Or at least
you
appear
know,
sane.
yeah. But I mean, I've had, friends walk up to me for signings after I was, on like a 7-day tour or something, and last day, and I'm just like, you're gonna have to tell me your name because that information is not present in my brain
You
right
look
now.
vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I know you. I know, we know each other, but just write it out for me. Which, as I recall, he was pretty upset. But just like, I'm so sorry.
I tell people
You don't know
I'm
how
like,
tired I am right now.
well, even people I've met before, I'm like, I don't expect ever, because I'm not great with names. I mean, it's like, if yeah, don't, just chill.
The number of writers that I know that have some level of, I can't call it face blindness because it's not face blindness. I'll recognize your face.
Mhm.
My ability to attach that to a name is sometimes a little bit
Yep.
not there. So, and when I'm tired, it's the first thing that goes.
That's like, I met somebody I didn't meet them. I saw somebody at a store one time, introduced them to my wife, had an entire conversation with them, left, and it wasn't until after they left, I was like, that's where I know them from. It's like, I know this face. I just hadn't seen them outside of work, so it was not clicking.
Right. Yeah. Well, I salute you. I
Yeah.
don't. Apparently, as somebody whose name I'm of course blanking on, even though she's super famous, said on a panel I was at once, I'm sorry, all that space in my brain is being taken up with names of my characters. So, or
some of you
in
got
my case, also like Star Wars.
some of your character names sometimes too, though, and not just you, but just writers in general. It's like, I don't remember what he was called.
And sometimes, like, something that seems like really obvious to me, somebody else will be like, I can't pronounce that. I'm like, really? Because that's like just.
I thought I actually was going to read this one because I thought it's like, Mallory. I can read all these names, but apparently I got Sarkodine wrong.
Sarkodine.
I tried to do Sarkodine.
That's fine. Doesn't matter. It's
all
right. They're the bad guys. It's cool.
Once we get to that audiobook stretch goal, I'm just kidding. No.
It's an add-on. It's not even a stretch goal.
Oh, okay.
Just have to get past. We have to fund.
Got to get the goal first.
Yeah. Yep. If we fund, there will be an audiobook.
So in other words, everybody tell your friends. I know there's a few people watching. I can see it. So get the book for yourself and a few of your friends. Yep. That's all we ask.
Right now, just like sign people up.
Yep.
Sign
like I said, again, if you jumped in late, there is a link below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching it on Twitch, you can't see it, but I don't think anybody's watching on Twitch right now. But if you go down underneath YouTube, there is a link to that backer kit that lets you sign up, and it doesn't go live until March 18th. And that's when you get to see all the stuffs.
Yep. Which I'm very much, we have all of the stuff, but I am making it all pretty for public consumption right now. So
yeah,
that's why I'm.
Well, let's face it, as much as we say not to judge a book by its cover, a lot of us buy the books based on what the cover looks like.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ted. Much appreciated. Yeah. So, yeah, I really want to share this with everyone. It's near and dear to my heart, and I happen to think it's a pretty good story. So, yeah, that's actually a thing before we go, I just need to say is that, we have friends that, foster cats. And so they have volunteered some of the pictures that they have taken of some of these cats to be the mascots, the mask cats, as my husband put it, for the 4 different factions that are like the team factions for the event.
Well, I think almost every author tells me that most of their best, especially their Instagram, always does better if there's a cat or a dog in it.
I am shamelessly going to be posting pictures of these babies because they're super cute. And the woman who takes care of them, she crochets, knits. I think it's crochets. Yeah, I think she crochets like little hats for them and things like that. So it's super adorable.
Be our 1 millionth backer and get a kitten. No, just kidding. Probably can't mail that. It probably doesn't work.
No, you can't mail that. But if you are in the greater Atlanta area, the Atlanta Humane Society will have a bunch of really adorable kittens in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, but my daughter fosters animals too, usually cats, sometimes puppies, but usually cats.
Yep. So I think this is going to be, the whole cat thing is hilarious. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah. So
if nothing else, we now know there are teams.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I am going to be dropping the first chapter.
Okay.
I am going to be posting the first chapter so people can read that and decide if
whet their appetite.
Yeah. I happen to think it's a pretty good first chapter. At least I like it. So.
And if you pay extra, she won't include the 20-page epilogue. Prologue. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't even know where that is anymore.
Just teasing.
I couldn't find that.
Yeah.
But even if I could find it, it would be completely wrong at this point. Because like I said, I pretty much tore this thing apart and put it back together again, much better than the original. So yeah. So
while I am thinking about it, I'm just going to go ahead and drop that in the chat too, since I didn't put it down in the put it down in the description, because I was worried about the backer kit. So that's, like I said, I posted that first, but also check out JennLyons.com.
Yeah, much appreciated.
All right, so
I'm actually updating it.
So. Well, I mean, yeah, you definitely have some stuff to update now. So,
yep.
Anybody have any questions, queries, or conundrums before we go? Give everybody about 60 seconds to throw something out there, and then we're going to let Jen actually catch up on some sleep since it's after 9 out there.
What are you talking about? I'm going to go right back to drawing.
I was trying to let you get some sleep.
Appreciated, but I got work to do. Hopefully. Work not in vain, because I'll actually be able to share it with everybody. That's the dream.
When are you dropping the chapter? Do we have like a time?
I
was dropping it tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. When am I supposed to be looking for this? Where am I supposed to be looking for this?
You are supposed to be looking for this. I believe I'm just going to be putting it on the teaser page.
For the backer kit?
On the backer kit is going to have a link to take you to where to read this.
Gotcha. So, and again, that link's underneath. So sign up for it, and then we will see that first chapter tomorrow. I'm getting the book either way. That's all there is to it.
Much appreciated. Yeah. And yep, there we go. So I'll be up tomorrow morning.
All right. Well, Jen, I want to thank you again for hopping on. I saw that this was coming out, and I think we almost crossed conversations there about, wanting to get on and do this and talk about it.
Yeah.
Totally looking forward to it. Again, like I said, that description, even if I wasn't just a Jenn Lyons fan in general, that description, especially in Mallory trained at the same school, I'm like, okay, I got to read this. This one's going to be totally up my alley. I will be checking that out. Hope everybody else does as well. And we're going to keep an eye on this March 18th. Don't forget, make sure you signed up before that. That way it'll send you a reminder.
It's a Tuesday because it's a book. Of course, it's a Tuesday.
For everybody except for James Patterson, but that's a different conversation.
Couldn't break tradition. Had to make it a Tuesday.
Perfect.
But yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.